Well, welcome back, guys. It wasn't a very long break between preseason game number 5 and preseason game number 6, and thus it's not a very long break for myself. So, preseason game number 6, Vegas Golden Knights versus the LA Kings in the friendly confines of Vivint Arena in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's going to be one of those special games where anything can happen. Now, you may remember 12 months ago, it was at this game in this very same arena where the very beginning of the Golden Knights injury saga that would come to engulf the entire 2021-22 season would begin with whether it be the injuries to Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, and basically anybody who could skate in that game that would persist onto the regular season. Let's hope it doesn't go that way this time. Given that there's a lot of NHL players in the lineup, I would consider that this was going to be more like a standard regular season game for the Golden Knights, with a roster consisting of Smith, Eichel, Kessel, Marchessault, Stevenson, Stone, Howden, Carlson, Amadio, Lecision, Manning, and Ronbjerg, with Martinez and Pietrangelo, McNabb, Theodore, and Bischoff and Korzak on the back end, with the goaltending battle being Logan Thompson versus Cal Peterson. Now, we got underway dropping the puck pretty easy, and I know you haven't gotten to the part of me talking to myself. There will not be any of that today. I will spare you guys the displeasure. I'm going to try and do this one all in one take like old days. So we get into the first period, and the LA Kings clearly wanted to get out and get started early, as they basically dominated the play early on in the first period and was able to capitalize on a couple of Golden Knights' defensive mistakes. It's very clear that the Knights D core, especially the older ones like Pietrangelo and Martinez, are still trying to learn the ropes of what Bruce Cassidy is expecting of them. And it kind of showed early on in this game as the LA Kings were able to open the scoring with Kevin Fiala making it 1-0 pretty early on, about 2 minutes in. It was a really good single-handed effort. He basically took a long pass up the left boards and essentially worked his way across the ice and then just fired a really good shot home past Logan Thompson. So, it's one of those goals where you could try and break it down and look at the 3 or 4 defensive breakdowns that allowed Fiala to get that much space and ultimately score. But there are also times you just get scored on, where everybody does the most that they can reasonably do, and the puck still finds its way into the net. And from my not-so-professional opinion, that's kind of what it looks like happened on this play, with the stat line reading Fiala from Kempe and Durzi at 152. Now, the Golden Knights, after giving up the opening goal, which has been a bit of a death sentence this preseason, didn't proceed to make their life any easier, as Sakari Mannanen would take a tripping penalty at 3:10. Fortunately, this penalty was killed off by the penalty killers with relatively little event, so it was a good way to settle down in the game. That was until about 3 minutes later when Gabe Vilardi would make it 2-0 for the Kings. He took a quick passing play from behind the net. It was a quick pass followed by a quicker shot. And what made me laugh a little bit is the fact that nobody knew the puck had gone in until about 5 seconds after everyone had stopped. Let's hold that thought because this may become relevant later on in the game. Just trust me. But ultimately, it wound up being a goal, sneaking past Logan Thompson on the short post, and wind up giving the Kings a 2-0 lead pretty early on in the first period. Stat line reading Vilardi from Moore and Clark at 6:09. And now it wouldn't be until much later on in the first period that the Golden Knights would actually start to get their act together in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, the offensive production and overall team chemistry ramped up over the course of this first period and finally reached a head when Riley Smith was able to put the Golden Knights on the board and cut the Kings' lead in half, making it 2-1 just before the end of the first period. This was just a testament to how much chemistry Jack Eichel and Riley Smith have, and I guess by proxy Phil Kessel, have developed over the course of this preseason. While they've only played 3 or 4 games together, it's been very clear that they have some natural ability to just figure out where each other is, because this pass from Jack Eichel could not have been any more perfect to hit Riley Smith streaking down the center of the ice. And he was just a quick forehand, backhand move, and he's just shelving it past Cal Peterson. So all in all, it was a very pretty goal to open up the scoring on behalf of the Golden Knights, with the stat line reading Smith from McNabb and Eichel at 16:36 of the first period. And with that really marked the end of the events in the first period, and thank goodness, because it was starting to get a little bit hectic there at the end as the Knights were actually kind of taking over what was going on. I don't really have any stats because one of the fun parts about Vivint Arena is they don't really have the greatest facilities in the world. And also I was more engaged in the fact that they were playing a game in Salt Lake City, Utah. I forgot to write down what the shot totals and faceoff percentages were at the end of the first period. So that's entirely my fault. So there won't be any of those numbers for me to vomit at you at the end of every period. Again, you get a break from that for one day. So you're very much welcome, the average viewer. So now we get into the second period, and the Golden Knights are looking to continue to build off of what they did at the end of that first period, following the Smith goal to make it 2-1. And clearly Braden McNabb got the memo for what they were trying to do, as pretty early on in the second period, he was able to knot the game up at 2 apiece. Basically, he just took a pass from Eichel in the middle of the ice and slapped it home long range through just a sea of Kings defenders. I'm not sure if it hit anybody on the way in, but what matters is that it got all the way to the net. It was on net, which is harder than it seems for our defense corps recently. And it ultimately wound up going in. So I guess, as Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Clearly, McNabb took the opportunity to take the shot and was rewarded for it by tying the game up at 2, reading McNabb from Eichel at 5:14 of the first period. What makes this really cool is that the way that the Golden Knights started the second period is rather akin to how the Kings started the first period, because similar to how the Knights kind of shot themselves in the foot again at the start of the first period by taking a penalty immediately after giving up a goal, the Kings decided to do their best impersonation of the Golden Knights, and Sean Durzi took a penalty at 6:51, so about a minute and a half after McNabb tied the game. It was a very effective power play, some good passing, but nothing really to show for it in terms of the scoring. They didn't really land many shots, if any, and they weren't really able to just do anything. But fortunately, Sean Durzi would give them another opportunity to practice that power play, because basically his first shift after being let out of the box, he decided to, tackle someone off of a faceoff and gets yet another interference penalty at 9:13. And this power play was an absolute disaster right up until the point where it wasn't. It started absolutely horrifically. I honestly thought at the start of the second power play that we were the team that was on the penalty kill and the Kings were on the power play, because they spent more time in our defensive zone than we did in our offensive zone when it came to puck possession. And they actually had the first and arguably the best chance on the power play on a turnover from Eichel that needed Logan Thompson to stand strong, which is odd given that it was a power play nonetheless. That being said, right at the very tail end of the power play, right as the penalty was expiring, we were finally able to get a zone entry and set up shop ever so slightly. Penalty clock ticked down, 3, 2, 1, even strength, and right then Chandler Stevenson decides to put the Golden Knights ahead 3-2. It was an interesting play, kind of a high to low, low to mid bump play that set up Stevenson kind of alone in the off of to Peterson's right in the low slot. And all things being equal, this is probably a goal that Cal Peterson's going to want back, because it managed to find a hole through him I didn't even know existed. So clearly not his brightest moment. But as a Golden Knights fan, I will take any bad break that I can get when it happens to the opposing goalie. And when it winds up putting us in the lead on the back of what was arguably the ugliest power play of the preseason, I will not complain under any sense of the word. So ultimately, the stat line reading Stevenson from Stone and Smith at 11:15. The pass from Mark Stone to Chandler Stevenson behind the net that set up the goal is just vintage Mark Stone. Think Mark Stone in the playoffs against the San Jose Sharks a couple of years ago when he was first brought over to the Knights. It appears that he may have fully recovered from his injury, which is what I really hope so. He's probably one of the more talented players that we have behind, up there with the likes of Jack Eichel and Alex Pietrangelo. But he's just such a hockey smart player, and it showed on this play, finding the seam to give Stevenson the perfect setup to ultimately score the go-ahead goal. And now, probably the moment you've been waiting for. If you watched the game, you know exactly what I'm about to say. Golden Knights get hemmed into their defensive zone with about 4 minutes to go, 5 minutes to go in the period. And there's just an absolute mayhem in front of Logan Thompson. He's having to make saves left, right, and center. And ultimately, it looks like the puck gets behind him, and Shea Theodore knocks it out of the net, akin to Team Canada at the World Juniors over the summer. And ultimately, the 3 of the Kings players threw their hands up and celebrated. The referee was emphatic that it was no goal, waving his hands dramatically. And what ensued next is the single funniest thing ever when it comes to being a hockey fan. When you see moments like that, you always tell yourself, now wouldn't it be hilarious if we went down and scored on the other end? And clearly Jonathan Marchessault heard me say that, because I was one of the many hockey fans who decided to say that a little bit too loud while sitting alone at my desk watching the game. And ultimately Jonathan Marchessault decided to say, yeah, cool, I'll make it 4-2. And he goes down and makes it 4-2. It was a really, really good pass from Theodore to find Marchessault in space and ultimately firing it home. It was what was kind of funny about it is it was just one of those goals that I was so busy laughing in the offensive zone that I don't really remember much of what happened. So after the Golden Knights score, they don't really show the replay of Marchessault scoring, but rather they show a replay of Logan Thompson making the save and Shea Theodore saving a goal at the other end of the ice. And it's very obvious that that puck is over the line, and Theodore caught it about half a second too late. The only slow-mo angle that I saw was Theodore knocking the puck straight down, and what we initially thought in real time was the puck landing on the goal line. It looked like there was at least a good inch or two of white ice between the puck and the goal line. Now, anybody who knows the rules knows that if called back, one, it would be a goal for the Kings, and two, it would take Marchessault's goal off the board. So instead of 4-2, it'd be 3-3. Remember how I said this game is being played in Salt Lake City? Yeah, Vivint Arena doesn't have an overhead camera over the net like every other arena in the National Hockey League, American Hockey League, and most major junior arenas. So there was no way for the official to go back and review it, whether it be for the perspective, the bending of light. We've seen reviews from those side angles, and they look nothing like their top-down counterparts. And because there was no top-down view, they just dropped the puck, and it is a 4-2 Golden Knights lead. So what was supposed to be a 3-3 game is now a completely different game now that the Knights have taken a 2-goal lead and put up 3 goals in this period. So that was an interesting turn of events. It just made me laugh. And that was really what was the main talking point during the second intermission, was how it totally wasn't a goal, and that Marchessault totally shouldn't have scored. But it wasn't a goal, and he did score. And so I'm not going to complain. It's really just one of those where else but in the preseason moments. And thank goodness there wasn't 2 points on the line, like it will be next week when we face off the Kings at Crypto.com Arena to open up the season. But it's just one of those funny moments that we're going to be able to carry with us through the entire regular season. And so the second period was a very solid period overall for the Knights. Obviously, they put up 3 goals and didn't give up any goals on the back end. So that was just a good moment. Wait, was it 3 goals? Yes, 3 goals. 3 goals. I'm doing this all in one take, so I might make a couple of mistakes here and there. But anyway, I'll try and minimize the speaking mistakes as we get into the third period, which didn't get off to the greatest start in the world. The Golden Knights now have to play with a 2-goal lead, and that's never really been our strong suit, especially coming off of last season where we blew more 2-goal leads than I can count. And we did a really good job to make it interesting, as Braden McNabb took a penalty holding at 1:17 of the third period. And it was very clear that the Kings meant business on this power play, and it was only a matter of time before they were able to cut into the Golden Knights lead. Kevin Fiala took a very hard shot off the post. It wasn't the scary side of the post, but it was, the post nonetheless, which makes the average fan worry. And then he had another good point shot on a one-timer about 40 seconds later, which was easily handled by Thompson, but still kind of concerning. So the Knights were able to clear the zone, the Kings break back in, and ultimately Trevor Moore puts the Kings back within 1 with a power play goal. Took advantage of a decently sized rebound out of a net front scrum off of Thompson. It just hit him, and he wasn't quite able to Velcro it to his chest. And there wasn't really any particular breakdown. It was just a decent power play goal. So that's the third goal that Thompson's given up, but 2 of them I wouldn't really say he did anything wrong, nor did the defense do anything wrong. He just got straight up scored on twice. And that just happens, especially in the preseason. With the stat line reading more from Kaliev and Dursey at 2:21 of the third period. So now it's 4-3. The Kings have some momentum. They're building back into the game, and they really do a good job to try and make it 4-4. As Kaliev took advantage of a turnover, and ultimately Thompson was able to stand strong. And then I think it was at that moment that the Golden Knights decided to wake up and say, wait a second, we probably should win this game now. There was a good chance, 2-on-1 with Carlson and Pietrangelo. Carlson feeding it across to Pietrangelo, and Pietrangelo getting kind of stuck between shooting it and passing it, ultimately having his shot pass thing blocked, trying to feed it back towards Carlson / the far post. So ultimately that was a low event. And then like 20 seconds later, Marchessault and Amadio broke in 2-on-1, and Marchessault called his own number and just rifled it past the far post just on the outside. So 2 really good opportunities, odd man rushes in quick succession. was kind of obvious that the Knights were able to rebound after giving up that third goal and say, okay, we're going to try and put this game out of reach now. And the good chances for the Knights continued to snowball from there. Brett Howden had a really good breakaway opportunity following a really slick set of mitts in the neutral zone, deking his way around a Kings defender and walking in all alone. This is like his third really good opportunity at this point in the game. So clearly Brett Howden, even though he's basically got a guaranteed spot on the lineup, he's trying to work his way up the depth chart and try and make his way onto the third line. And I give him the spot. He worked really well in this game, especially when he was paired up with Mark Stone. And so that's a line of combination I wouldn't be overly, I wouldn't hate seeing come the regular season. And fortunately, the ability the ability for the Knights to keep pushing the play was much aided by the fact that Drew Doughty decided to take a tripping penalty at 8:05 of the third. And this was just one of those penalties that if you were a Kings fan, you got to shake your head. There was one Knights player and 3 Kings player, and Doughty decides to take the feet out of someone. And so I don't know what he was thinking there. And ultimately, the Golden Knights wound up making them pay, as Riley Smith is able to pot his second goal of the game on the power play to put the Knights ahead by 2 again by a score of 5-3. This was just a textbook power play goal for the Golden Knights. It was a low or high to mid to bumper in the middle of the ice, and then bumper over to Stevenson or over to Smith, who was able just to go shelf again for his second goal of the game. It was a very pretty goal, good passing play, and Stevenson outworked the 2 defenders that were covering him in the bumper position to feed the puck tape to tape over to Smith, with the stat line reading Smith from Stevenson and Eichel at 8:37 on the power play. So now with the game 5-3, the game kind of settles down a little bit. There's about 8 minutes where nothing really of note happens. There's just a lot of neutral zone hockey, a couple of decent chances each direction, but both goalies standing strong, knowing that the game is still in a position where it can go either way. If somebody has a lapse in judgment, 2 goals can evaporate really quickly. And the Knights appeared pretty eager to test that theory as Riley Smith took a tripping penalty at 15:03. And it was a little bit of a soft call, but it was kind of a trip. I overheard over the hot mic that Dursey, the guy who drew the penalty, was saying, no, ref, I just fell, but ultimately the call was made. This isn't what happened with Ovechkin at the end of last regular season, where he single-handedly waved off a penalty. There's a little bit of a seniority difference between Alexander Ovechkin and Sean Dursey. So, again, it's the preseason, and the refs have already made one oopsie by giving us a goal and taking a goal away from the Kings. So I consider it even. They can get a penalty that isn't a penalty and go to a man advantage that they shouldn't necessarily get. And ultimately, despite trying to be a good guy and let go of the penalty, Sean Dursey winds up putting the Kings back in it again, making it 5-4. He took advantage of a mistake and then went low on Logan Thompson from distance. And this is one that I'm sure Thompson wants back. So Peterson gave up a shaky goal in the second period, and Thompson gave up a somewhat shaky goal in the third. The thing that was concerning is that our 2 most senior defensemen in the forms of Alex Pietrangelo and Alec Martinez both combined to set up for the turnover that led to Dursey's goal. So clearly there's still a little bit of a disconnect for those 2 defensemen in particular for the new Bruce Cassidy defense system that they're going to have to iron out pretty quickly in the next game against the Coyotes, and then hopefully figure out by the time they get to the Crypt on October 11th to open up against the Kings for the regular season. That being said, with a score of 5-4, things are a little bit more tense in Knights land, as you know. This is the second or third time in the game where we've had a 2-goal lead and then had that lead halved, and then we made it really interesting. With that goal from Dursey, assisted by Kaliyev and Danault at 15:51 on the power play, there isn't a lot of time left in the game, so that's really the one benefit the Knights have, is they don't have to kill off the ultimate pressure of the Kings for 15 minutes. They only have to do it for 4. And it wound up being a very quick 4 as the LA Kings pulled Cal Peterson with about $1.50 left in the game. So there's about 110 seconds left in regulation, and they're trying to do everything they can. They've got the puck pinned deep in our defensive zone. They've got their foot on the gas. And then Alex Pietrangelo says, you know what, I'm going to make up for that mistake. I'm just going to fire it down at the empty net. And it wound up just curling right in. It was way downtown. Like, I wouldn't trust myself to hit, the side. I wouldn't try to hit the broadside of a barn with a hockey puck from that distance. And yet Pietrangelo was able to put it in the 6x4 of the net from almost 200 feet away. He was behind our net, and he just launched it over the heads of everybody, landed it around the offensive blue line, and just skirted it on in. Put the Knights up 6-4. This goal being unassisted and empty net. Just a good way to cap off the game. And ultimately, the Knights were able to just wind everything down and take home the victory at a final score of 6-4. Now, this wasn't by any means the end of the festivities at Vivint Arena. There was a shootout that the two teams engaged in for fun after the game, which was, it went a little bit better. It wasn't anywhere near as long as the first for fun shootout that went 14 rounds last week. Brett Howden opened up the shooting festivities by finally being able to capitalize on a odd man rush breakaway opportunity because he had enough of them in the regular game. Able to go bar down on Cal Peterson, basically just shot it right by his ear. Perfect shot, and it made the good old pink sound that everybody likes from behind when you fire a puck perfectly past a goalie. Logan Thompson stands tall on their first shooter, and Sakari Mannanen comes in and tries to snap it glove side, but it's still a good save. So it's the Kings have 2 failed shots at this point. We have one goal, so it's 1-0 after 2 rounds of the shootout. And ultimately, the Kings, who shot first, send out their third shooter. He misses, and Logan Thompson goes 3 for 3 in the for fun shootout to wrap up the pretend extra point for the Knights, just for fun, good practice. Aiden Hill got the first one. He went a long way, gave up a lot of goals in the process, and Thompson picked up where he left off after last season's shootout escapade, where he got no run support at the end of the season and continues to be pretty good in the shootout. So now looking at the game as a whole, it's very obvious that the Smith, Eichel, Kessel line just keeps getting better and better every single night. They've looked more and more comfortable with each other as the games have gone on, and as they've gotten more familiar with each other's play style, they've been really consistently putting up points, and they basically stole the show in this game. Even though Eichel only featured a little bit on the stat sheet and Kessel really didn't feature at all on the stat sheet, they were all doing a good job setting up Riley Smith in positions to ultimately put the game out of reach by scoring 2 pretty quality goals in big moments, whether it be cutting the lead in half early in the first period by putting up the Knights' first goal of the game, or ultimately scoring on the power play to try and make the game, a little bit more interesting. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to get on Logan Thompson a little bit. He's probably my favorite goalie to come through the Knights organization since Marc-Andre Fleury, given that, I feel like I've been there watching him play his first ever game in a Knights uniform as a starter last year against the Nashville Predators. He looked a little bit shaky. He didn't look exceptional. He did what he needed to do to secure the win, even though he let in 4 goals. Sure, 2 of them were just good goals. The other 2 he probably wants back. And we have to remember that it's the preseason, so I doubt his defense corps is putting their body on the line to block as many shots as they would on any given normal day. So I'll give him a little bit of a pass, but because of that, and when looked at Aiden Hill's last game, I considered this goalie battle to be a little bit tighter than we thought it was, say, 4 days ago. So it was a good game, but there's room for improvement as always. The officiating, and I know it's the preseason for the refs too, but it was questionable to say the least. It was just interesting. Whether it be the goal that wasn't a goal that led to a goal that shouldn't have been a goal, and whether it be a couple of soft calls, especially that put the Kings to a lot of power plays late in the game, it was just one of those interesting moments. But again, these are just, preseason officials. Obviously, these are the officials for the regular season as well, but it's their preseason too. They're figuring out what's going on, and I'm sure there's a penalty crackdown coming down. I'm not sure if it's going to be, interference or cross-checking this time around. But I'm sure the officiating standards will continue to improve as we ultimately get to the regular season come next week, and then, march through the regular season when we get into December. The one thing that was a little bit concerning for the second game of the last 3 is the fact that the defense just needs to play a little bit better. We need to do something to inspire a little bit of confidence, because right now it's all the young players, whether it be Caden Korzak in this game, or Shea Theodore and his eternal ability to play good defense, or Braden McNabb just being Braden McNabb. Beyond that, the defense core has been a little bit shaky, so hopefully the final preseason tune-up against the Arizona Coyotes on Saturday will be a good opportunity for them to iron out whatever they need to iron out and just help build towards the start of the regular season against the LA Kings on October 11th. So that being said, wrap it all up again. Golden Knights win 6-4 in Vivint Arena, Salt Lake City, Utah against the LA Kings. If you liked the video, be sure to subscribe. I know this was a little bit rushed, but I'm kind of under the gun at the moment, so I went for an old-time one-taker, and I decided not to talk to myself, which, believe me, will be coming back in the next one very shortly. So be sure to stay tuned, as I've got hopefully a lot more than 83 of these game rundowns and hopefully a couple of breaking news moments to break over the next 7 months. And I hope you guys want to join me. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.